You're muted.
How's that? Better? I was so proud about hitting the record button on time that I couldn't remember to put my audio on. Someday we'll get it all put together in the right spot. All right, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We are missing Garrett, but I think that Garrett won't be joining us. Kenna's at the lake. Okay, this is our class today. How you all doing? Acceptable? Still breathing? So excited to have this opportunity to talk about the fantastic Article 1 of the United States Constitution and the preamble. Everything you ever hoped for and more. Yeah. At least Mr. Trisha's being honest over there and going, no. That's okay. We're gonna go for it anyway. I was gonna ask questions to get started. I have this belief that if I ask you get to know you questions to start, it breaks the concern of speaking out loud over the speaker, and therefore you will be more excited and willing to participate afterwards. There is a method to my madness. So I'm gonna ask some questions. You good for that? Okay. You're like, yeah, I can see over here. Lydia's like, oh, gee, I'm thrilled right here, right now. This is my thrilled face. All right, I have to find my questions though. Okay, Maya, give me 2 pet peeves.
People who stink. That drives me nuts. People taking my food that I made.
It's all yours. All right, Lydia. How many pairs of shoes do you own?
I'm not completely sure, actually. Probably around maybe like 10
Okay.
that I wear. I don't know.
Okay. Adam, if you were a superhero, what power would you have?
This one's.
You went away. I can't hear you talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Probably teleportation because you can go any place, anytime, just anywhere in the world. That'd be amazing in my opinion.
I accept that. I accept that. Isabella, what is your favorite zoo animal?
Horse.
That's
There
shocking.
are no horses in zoos?
There is.
Well, there's that special zebra horsey thing.
There
Right.
is horses in the zoo, at least in the Phoenix one.
Okay. All right, Jack. What is the best gift you have been given?
Oh, that's hard. I guess my senior trip, we went on a mountain goat hunt to Canada. So I guess that would have to be it.
That sounds pretty awesome. All right, Miss Maggie, aside from necessities, what one thing could you not go a day without?
Hair ties.
Understandable. Understandable. All right, Ryan, how many pillows do you sleep with?
I have two, but I only use one.
Okay, very important. Michaela, what is the worst gift you have been given?
What am I supposed to say?
Well, don't say something I've given you.
I don't know.
You want to go back at me? Because I have one.
I got you.
When I was like 10, my step grandma gave me a multi-pack of plastic combs for Christmas. It was a terrible gift. It was real bad.
My grandma gave me 40 razors every Christmas. Well, first time she got me razors, she only got me 24. Second time she got me 40. And then she didn't give me any more razors after that. She remembered that she got me razors the year before finally.
And you're like, I'm still working through the 40-pack, Graham.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Michaela, your second question is, what form of public transportation do you prefer? Air, boat, train, bus, car?
Probably just car.
Okay. All right. And Tyler, what is the longest you've gone without sleep and why?
$51 hours, I think. No, 47. I don't know. Somewhere in between. I didn't go to sleep from 8 a.m. one day and then 5 p.m. the day after the next day. Whatever that is. It's like 47.
A lot of hours.
It's a
Why?
lot of hours. Because I was working the whole time and I had too much caffeine both nights.
And it just went bad. All right.
It's
Miss-
okay. I slept for like 10 hours. It was nice.
Miss Patricia, do you want to participate and get a question? Isabella says yes. If you could go back in time and change one thing, what would it be?
Oh, this is gonna sound so corny because there's a whole bunch of kids on here, but I would talk to my mom more. I would have listened to her more, not her telling me what to do, like talking about things.
Yeah. Understandable. All right. Everybody got a question, right? I haven't forgotten anyone. Okay. Let me share my screen. And move you guys over here. And make this bigger. Okay, I've got you all. Okay. The big thought that we left with last week was talking about virtue and that video and eudaimonia and the American pursuit of happiness. And the question was, to what degree does being virtuous mean that you can be happy? What kind of thoughts do you guys have about that? Miss Patricia.
I'm thinking that maybe you might not have any regrets. I don't know that it makes you happy, but I would think that you wouldn't regret whatever decisions you make or something along those lines.
Can you guys think of any other thing where happy maybe isn't? I'm asking the question in a wrong way. Give me some definitions of what pursuit of happy might be.
Anything that is like, I mean, it can be really wrong things like happiness, pornography, drugs, or like for me playing outside. I love doing soccer. That's a form of happiness for me. So, yeah, like anything basically.
Any other thoughts about what this pursuit of happiness is?
I don't know if this goes directly with that, but I wrote down, if you live in God's law and for his will, you will be happy.
Okay. Is there a churchy term for this idea of happy that you guys know about? What about the idea of joy? Have you all have had discussions or heard about the difference between being happy and being joyful? No? Yes, I got some nods there. Okay, so what do you know about being happy versus being joyful?
Isn't happy like, ooh, I don't know if this is like how I'm not 100% sure at the least bit, but isn't happiness, ooh, yeah, never mind. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think that what you brought up earlier, Adam, is that happy can be based on your situation or the things that you have. And joyful, as I think it was Paul who defined it in the New Testament, he was in prison and he didn't have all of the things that would make life easy, right? And he said, I have learned to be joyful in all of my circumstances. So that joy idea didn't have to do with what you had achieved or what physical things you could put your hands on, but about your state of mind and your contentment. And I think that what Jack brought up about understanding the boundaries and living a good life within them links back to this idea of virtuous. And the reason I think that this is relevant to our conversation about America is that within our founding documents, we had the idea of pursuit of happiness. And I think that's a really hard thing to put your hands around. But if you consider the fact that our framers were influenced by the ancient Greeks and by Aristotle, who came up with this idea of virtuous, which was kind of doing the right thing at the right time and just understanding the situation and how to live well. And this idea that Paul puts forth of joy being not dependent on your circumstances or your things, but just who you are inside. If you can put those two ideas into your mind, it helps you understand a little bit more of what the American dream is supposed to be. Does that make sense? The American dream was not supposed to be that you have a really big bank account or that you have a really fancy car. It was supposed to be about being given the opportunity to live the way that you felt was morally correct, so that at the end of the day, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, this is a good thing. I have done good work. And that the government wouldn't get in the way of that. Does that make sense? It's a very different thing than I think we define happiness today. So do you guys have any other thoughts about that or different takes or ideas? Okay. I want to come to new ideas, but I came across this video today or this week that I thought related back to one of our big ideas the first week, that all of the framers were deists and that the separation of state is super important. This is a guy named Charlie Kirk, and he really has made a name for himself arguing with people. One of the things he likes to do is to go onto college campuses and ask students to ask him questions, and then he uses logic and apologetics to respond to those questions. And this is a clip that goes back to this idea of separation of church and state that I did not know prior to watching it. So I wanted to just share that with you guys as well.
Our country was founded on common law because the Declaration only refers to God 4 times in the Constitution, doesn't refer to God at all. and it only articulates the structure of government.
So first of all, remember that we were a collection of states and colonies, and you need to read the state constitutions before anything else. 13 out of 13 required a declaration of faith. 9 out of 13 required you to be a Protestant, except Maryland, which was Catholic, which still required a declaration of faith. Every single one of the original state constitutions, Pennsylvania included, they had, I profess Lord and Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior in the original state constitutions. Secondly, 55 out of 56 of the original signers of the Declaration were Bible-believing, church-attending Christians. You asked about common law. So common law is inherited from Blackstone, who was Christian. A common law is an outgrowth of the scriptures. So let's go to 3 principles of common law: presumption of innocence, due process, and jury of your peers. All 3 are biblical principles. So, and all wrapped into the ultimate biblical principle that you shall not favor justice if you are rich or poor, which is in Leviticus 19, right before the most famous part of Leviticus 19, which is that you should love your neighbor as yourself. But before that is that in the administration of justice, you shall not favor the rich or the poor, which is the idea of blind justice. We get that in the West, which is incorporated also in the New Testament ideal, neither slave nor Greek nor Jew, you're all one in Jesus Christ, which we get the idea of human equality. These are all biblical ideas. They're not Enlightenment ideas. But more importantly than that, they say that God was only mentioned 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. Well, that's a big deal. Okay. Laws of nature and nature's God. The last paragraph of the Declaration reads as a prayer. It says, we appeal to the supreme judge of the universe. Who's the judge of the universe? Jesus Christ. It says in Revelation that Jesus will judge the earth on his throne. So in the Declaration, they were praying to Christ our Lord as a prayer very specifically. Thirdly, as I said on stage yesterday, Deuteronomy was by far the most quoted book, religious or non-religious, in the time of the founding when they were putting together the Constitution, more than John Locke, more than Montesquieu, more than Blackstone. So the book of Deuteronomy, which talked about laws, customs, traditions. It was Moses' farewell address as he's about to say goodbye, say, hey, good luck in Canaan, guys. Here's how you should set up your form of government. But finally, and most importantly, let's look at actually what the founders said. John Adams famously said the Constitution was only written for a moral and religious people. It was wholly inadequate for the people of any other. The body politic of America was so Christian and was so Protestant that our form and structure of government was built for the people that believed in Christ our Lord. One of the reasons we're living through a constitutional crisis is that we no longer have a Christian nation, but we have a Christian form of government, and they're incompatible. So you cannot have liberty if you do not have a Christian population.
What do you think about that? Was that interesting to you? I had never thought about looking at the state constitutions. But the reality is all that we're learning is talking about how the states had the majority of the power and the federal government was the association after. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I just wanted to share that with you guys so that you could have the same aha moment 20 years earlier than I had it. So there you have it. Any other new ideas that came up as you were looking through this week's chapters? You got nothing? Okay. All right. One of the things that it was pointed out to me that we talked about last week, but did not go into detail on was the Magna Carta. So I wanted to circle back to that. Apparently today is all about circling back to things we've talked about and trying to make sure that we're all on the same page. Can any of you, do you remember what we were talking about the Magna Carta last week? And why it was important? Maggie, you moved your hand forward like you were going to speak. Was that just adjusting your video?
Yeah, I was just adjusting my video, sorry.
Okay. Can any of you give me a simple idea of what the Magna Carta is? Okay. This is why it was really good for me to get the heads up that I was talking and emoting about something that you guys had no idea what I was talking about. So, have you heard of the Crusades? And the Crusades happened when the English kings decided to go and reclaim Jerusalem Jerusalem was the Holy Land, and they wanted to reclaim it from the Muslims. So there were multiple crusades, and they did it in the name of the church, and the church had the king behind them. And so they raised up all of these people that were going to go and fight to return Jerusalem to the Jews. So, eerie situation if you are following world politics right now at all. Israel is fighting for Jerusalem and the Jews. Okay, so we're talking about something that has happened literally over the course of thousands of years. Is this particular piece of land has been in play, and people have been fighting against and for who owns this area. It is a holy space to the Jews, and it is a holy space to the Muslims. So this is an ongoing conflict. For our purposes, King John, remember Robin Hood and the story of Robin Hood? Well, there was King John and King Richard. This is where we are, is in kind of the medieval area of history. King left, and he had taken all of the people's money and all of the people's sons, and he was acting like he was the best thing that ever happened. And he was just acting like the worst of the kings. I have all the power and I'm going to own it. Well, in the process of it, I'm going to refer back to my website because the way that they wrote it was very good. Okay. What happened was there was the royal power, and that was the king. And the royal was in charge of anything that affected the monarch's peace, whether directly or indirectly. So if the monarch decided it was their business, it was their business. That was it. There was no actual written down, this belongs to you. It was whatever the monarch, the king, thought needed to be their business. The other government was the Catholic Church, which England was a Catholic nation, and they would oversee the church clergy and religious offenses such as heresy and most moral, marital, and court orders. Like people would go to court and they would have to swear to the priest that they were telling the truth. And then there were the barons, and the barons were the ones who owned large pieces of land, and they managed the production of the workers and the lives of the workers there. So you had 3 different sets of power happening in England. And what happened is that King John made both the barons and the church really, really angry for various things, which is not what we're talking about in this class per se, but it's fair to say he overstepped his power and infuriated everyone. So the church decided that they would not serve any of the people in England, and their priests were not allowed to have services. They were not allowed to hear confession. They were not allowed to serve do baptisms or christenings or anything. They said, we're mad at the king, so we're not going to serve the people. Which lets you see a little bit about why some people might have questioned the church's authority. And the people were freaking out because that was a really big deal. And the barons were furious with the king. And they said, you are acting like a jerkface, and we're tired of it. We have rights too. So they trapped King John, and they basically at sword point said, you're going to agree to some rules about how we are going to move forward. And these rules will become laws, and those laws are how we will move forward in this country, and you do not get to be the boss of all of us anymore. I'm obviously using my own words for this, and I'm giving you a really broad stroke of what was going on. But that document that they made King John sign was called the Magna Carta. Every Republican or Democratic document, or places like when we say in the free world, when we say the free world of the US, the foundation of those expectations of how people are allowed to live were first written down in the Magna Carta. Does that make sense? So the basis of law and equality and liberty came initially from the Magna Carta in, I'm going to give you the actual date, 1215. Okay, so we have had 800 years of this idea of justice and equality, and it started with the Magna Carta. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, so that's why it's important for you to know.
Can you tell me what the date was again? It was like, what'd you say?
1215.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
1215. Okay. So I'm now done with the Magna Carta, unless you guys want to talk about it more. Oops, I did that wrong. And were there any other ideas or new words that came up that we should be talking about from this week's reading?
One thing that, I mean, I might be just taking this the wrong way, but what it means to, what degree does it being victorious mean you can be happy? And like that. And it's just like, a lot of times in sports or something, like I know, oh, I forgot, I don't play football a lot, but some dude won the World Cup 3 times, and he said afterward, he goes, oh, he goes, is this really it? This is all that it is? And it's like, God is the only one that can really fill that. And I think it's word for word, is this it? Is this really it? Because after that, he was like, well, do I just have to go win another one? Is that going to make it real? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do any of you guys have any ideas? Have you ever accomplished something and thought, oh, well, that was great, but is this really it? Yeah, Michaela, you're nodding your head. You want to talk about that? I like words.
Well, the instance I was thinking was when I was playing a soccer game and it was the finals of the big tournament that we played and we were winning and then he blew the end whistle and I was like, are we really done? That's what I was thinking.
Yep. Any other experiences you've had where you thought, really? This is all? You know what I think about? I don't know how many of you have seen Hamilton, the musical. But when General Washington says, winning is easy, son, ruling is harder, that is also this idea, like you can win, but now what? What are you going to do with it? Or Benjamin Franklin walking out of the Constitutional Convention and saying, it's a republic if you can keep it. So I think that the victory is important and it is sweet, but also there's some work to come to make it worth it. Okay, what other ideas or words that we had to look up? Yes, Maggie.
I mean, it wasn't a new word, but we did look up welfare, the definition of welfare.
What did you discover? Is there a difference between how they wrote about it in the Constitution and how it's used today?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Oh gosh. It was now isn't it now it's used as kind of like happiness, but back then it was um making sure everybody had a home, everybody was healthy, could go to the doctor kind of thing.
Flip it. So
Okay.
historically, it was general sense of well-being. And it was supposed to be the government should only be involved in the things that would benefit the majority of the people and improve their general thing of life. So a road, an interstate highway, it generally benefits the majority of the population. And so it would apply to the general welfare of the people. Requiring that you have a jury of your peers if you are in trouble. It generally helps everyone. But now, when we say welfare, and this started around Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency, when we were experiencing the Great Depression in our country, welfare started to be, how can we help the people who are the poorest among us? And so the welfare system, as we describe it today, would look like the government handing out food for people who have a lower income. It might look like helping people with low income have a down payment for a house, or providing health insurance to people. And it's always pointed towards the lowest earners, the ones who make the least amount of money, and it doesn't benefit the population at large. So the term has very much changed from the time that it was written in the United States to what we see today. Any other thoughts or words? Yeah, Isabella.
We had to look up enumerated.
What does that mean?
So it basically just means that the things that are listed, and for the specific question that it was on, the things that are listed in the Constitution.
And for a gold star, how many things is the federal or is the Congress allowed to do? Do you remember that number? It's okay if you don't. But in our Constitution, the Congress was given 18 things, and that was it. And if it was not one of those 18 things, then it was not supposed to be something that the federal Congress was involved in at all. Okay. Any other words? How about the word alien? What does alien mean, guys?
Well, wasn't it described like for the anchor babies and all that, just like anybody that didn't legally come into the United States, they were now aliens technically?
Mm-hmm. So that is absolutely how we use that word in the government now, as like illegal aliens. It just means foreigner. Someone who is not of the land that they are in. So we also use it to talk about little green men that are coming to take over your bodies, but it's not just that. Any other words? Okay. Take the time to look these words up because we are working with, oh, Isabella has more. What, you have another one? Oh, Miss Patricia has another one.
Ratified.
What does ratify mean?
I don't know.
I'm joking.
To settle authoritatively.
What does that mean?
Or authoritatively. I'm not sure how to say that word.
I think it can actually be used both ways depending on usage.
Whew.
It's an authoritative source. I do know that.
So what we gathered was basically it just meant that that's how all I can think of is a specific example that with all of the framers, the people who signed the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, that's what made it go in, what made it permanent, I guess is the word.
Mm-hmm. It's like a hard yes. It's not, it's, we agree with everything that's here and we give you our word that we will uphold it. We ratify it. Instead of like we kind of like it, which is exactly what the Articles of Federation had, which is why we ended up at the Constitutional Convention, because under the Articles of Federation, they said, well, we'll pay taxes when we feel like it. And they didn't ratify until they got to the Constitution. I believe. I should actually check that, but it's a hard yes. I do know that. So, anything else? Okay. We are working literally with a language that is not the same as the language we're using today. So you will find these words all over. And if you don't stop and look them up and figure out what they're actually talking about, you will miss part of the joy. So, I mean, I know that it may sound strange that I'm saying this can be joyful, but I promise you, you'll feel better if you understand what you're talking about. So don't ever hesitate to look that up. All right. I'm going to actually skip the workbook answers. Well, how quick can we do it? I think it was about half of you that had the answers in there. Is that right? That already checked them? I think I want to go on to the questions for right now, and we'll circle back to the homework at the end. Or I'll send it out in the email if we run out of time. So here we go. We're talking about American citizenship and what is a right or a responsibility. So, I don't like doing thumbs up and thumbs down on this one because I think that they're all good. But if it is a right, why don't you raise your left hand? And if it is a responsibility, raise your right hand. Can we do that? Let's see if I can remember that myself. What is the freedom to express yourself? Is it a right or a responsibility?
Which company? And phone number?
It's a right. Okay. What is the ability to support and defend the Constitution? Is it a right or a responsibility?
Yep, sure thing. Bye.
It's a responsibility. What about the freedom to worship as you wish? Is it a right or a responsibility? Okay, it's a right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Which word is which?
Right
No.
or responsibility. This isn't
So
working.
a right is your right. A right is your right hand.
And responsibility is left.
Okay. Thanks.
Right? I'm now discovering that I hold my finger out in a weird way, or responsibility. Okay. This is pure chaos. We could also unmute ourselves and just shout it out. What would you prefer? You want to raise your hands? Okay. All right. All right. How about to respect and obey federal, state, and local laws? Is it a right or a responsibility? It's a responsibility. How about the respecting of the rights, beliefs, and opinions of others? A right or responsibility? It's a responsibility. All right, participation in your local community. Is it a right or a responsibility? It's a responsibility. Have a prompt, fair trial by jury. Right or responsibility? It's a right. How about voting in elections for public officials? It's a right. Applying for federal employment requiring US citizenship. It's a right. Paying taxes honestly and on time to federal, state, and local authorities. Right or responsibility? It's a responsibility. Serving on a jury when called upon. Right or responsibility? It's a responsibility. Defending the country if the need should arise. Right or responsibility? It's a responsibility. Running for elected office, right or responsibility? It's a right. The freedom pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right or responsibility? That's a right. Staying informed of issues affecting your community, right or responsibility? It's a responsibility. Participating in the democratic process.
I don't even know what that is, so
Okay, the democratic process would be paying attention to what's going on around you and forming an opinion so that you could speak on it if you needed to. It would be when it's time to vote, you actually do vote. Okay, that is a responsibility. And thank you for asking for what that was for clarification. All right, I'm going to pause right here because we're at the end of the right and responsibilities. Oh, we have a question. Is that a question?
I really need you to repeat just what you said about this participate in the democratic process, because my daughter said you have a choice to vote or not.
Mhm.
So she thinks it's a right, not a response. And so I just want you to repeat what you just said.
Okay. You do have you have the right as an American citizen, if you are 18 years old, to show up to an election and vote. That is your right. However, it is also a responsibility because you can choose whether you're going to vote or not vote. Does that make sense? Like if you show up, they can't say, no, you can't vote, as long as you followed whatever rules there are. And that's actually a huge topic of conversation. Some states will say that you have to show a valid ID saying that you're an actual citizen of the United States. Other states do not. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but you have the ability to vote. And when you participate in the democratic process, it is a responsibility to do so with knowledge and intelligence. Does that make sense? So the whole idea, when you see the DEMO root, DEMOC, in general, that's going to refer to something that involves your voice and your job as a citizen. If that makes sense, because democracy, the concept of democracy, it is the people having a voice in it, as opposed to other forms. A monarchy would be that the main voice that's heard is the king or the ruling class. If you were in a theocracy, the main voice that would be heard would be the religious or the spiritual ruling class. Does that make sense? I'm suddenly realizing that you may have never studied different forms of government before. Is this kind of you guys as a class, is this your first introduction to different types of government? Okay. That's really helpful. And I apologize because I have kind of just assumed you knew some things. And so stop me. If I'm talking about something that doesn't make sense, stop me. Because there are different types of government. And in many ways, the government is about who gets the power. We have a world, if nobody has the power, that's called an anarchy. And there's no law. But most people find that they thrive and have better communities if they have some sort of a governmental structure. And over time, that might have looked like a civil class, which is what we have here, where just everyday people can be a part of the government that creates the law. It might be a spiritual or religious class, which would be more of the church being in charge. And that could be the church, like Catholic or Protestant, or it could be pagan. Like if you go, say, to the ancient Greeks, the temples, it could be any kind of religious application. So usually it's going to fall down to the worldview of the people that are being governed and what they want. Or it's going to fall down to whoever has the most power wins. If you have the biggest guns, you win. In olden times, if you could wield your sword hard enough or hire enough people with swords, you win and you're in charge. And that philosophy is called might, M-I-G-H-T, makes right, R-I-G-H-T. And that's a really interesting idea because it doesn't have anything to do with a moral absolute or a belief in truth. It's just, I'm strongest. I get to do whatever I want. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, moving on to the next part of the quiz. We're back to the A, B, C's, and D's. The preamble of the Constitution uses the phrase to ensure the blessings of liberty on ourselves, to ourselves, and our posterity. The framers intended to show by these words that they believed the Constitution was a living, breathing document. They intended the Constitution to be a permanent document, or they were only concerned for their generation's problems. They intended the Constitution to be a permanent document. Posterity is another one of those words that we don't use very often. Poster means it means like legacy, the ones who are coming next. The Federalist Papers were written by blank and signed a Publius. A Publius is actually just a citizen. That's Latin. It's just citizen. So was it Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe? Was it Alexander Hamilton, Governor Morris, and Samuel Adams? Was it Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay? Or George Washington, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin?
So for these ones, I'm pretty.
Uh-oh, you cut out a little bit. Can you say it again?
Are we allowed to look back on like the questions and all of that and see what we wrote down before?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm just trying to use these questions to stick it into your brain. I'm not trying to catch you up or anything else. And I will say that I know the answer because of watching Hamilton many times. Alexander Hamilton wrote the other 59 or whatever. Okay. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. In the ratification debates, the Constitution's supporters called themselves Democrats, Whigs, Republicans, and Federalists. And the answer is D. And if you can remember, I know not everybody read Tempest at Dawn, but that was a very strategic decision because they wanted their opponents to have to be anti-federalists. And so it was just a little word play within there. Okay, the phrase, "we the people," in the preamble indicated the framers understood, which is a misspelling that I will fix right now, governmental power was derived from pure democracy, the consent of the government governed, or a bicameral legislature. The power comes from the consent of the government, of the governed. What does consent mean? Maggie?
Isn't it like permission?
Yeah. Yep. Again, why did my P not stay? There we go. Okay. Prior to 1915 and the presumed adoption of the 17th Amendment, senators were A, elected by popular majorities from each state, chosen by each state legislature, appointed by the president, or appointed by the Supreme Court. It is chosen by each state legislature. And now they're elected. But prior to that, they were selected by the powers of the state. The primary characteristics of a republic are that the government is indirect through representatives, the rule of law is supreme and all men are subject to it, the minority has rights that even the majority may not violate, or all of the above. All right, the answer is all of the above. One thing that you can identify here is REP, Republic, and REP, Representatives. That's a little hint that those two are very connected. Just so that you, because I think that you have to have hints for multiple choice questions. Okay, the weakness of a democracy is that not enough voters will participate in actually governing. The majority rule, or the rule of man, is absolute, and the tendency is toward mobocracy, a mob. A government by the mob is mobocracy. A two-party system will prevent an opportunity for true alternatives to be available, or the wrong people will always seize the power. The majority rule, or the rule of man, is absolute, and the tendency is toward the mob. I think we need to understand that our framers were really scared of mobs. They had seen it go bad, and they did not really want a mob to be in charge of stuff. Article 1, Section 7 sets the legislative process for providing that a revenue bill always originates from the Senate, the Oval Office, the House, or none of the above. The answer is the House. And if you go back to how it was when it was originally started, the House was the only part of the government that was purely elected by other citizens. And so if the money that the government was going to spend came from the people needed to be the ones to decide how to spend the money, not the courts, not the president, the people. And at that point, the House was the only place where the people were selected. The Senate was done by the state legislature. So you have to kind of recognize we're doing something different now. If the president vetoes a piece of legislation, his veto can be overridden by the Supreme Court, 2/3 majority of the House, 2/3 majority in the Senate, or 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. It's the House and the Senate. In Article 1, Section 8, the power of Congress to tax and spend is limited to payment for the common defense, payment for debts, common defense and general welfare, debts, social security, education, and health and human services, or none of the above. Debts, common defense, and general welfare. The difference between general welfare and specific welfare is it's restricted or limited to the 18 enumerated powers, is general. Specific welfare is for certain groups with certain needs. General welfare is constitutional and specific welfare is unconstitutional, or D, all of the above. The answer is all of the above. According to Article 1, Section 8 of the federal government can own and exercise legislative authority over the following property: post offices and post roads, Washington, D.C., military facilities, national parks and landmarks, roads, bridges, and highways, or all of the above. All right, the answer is A. So that is the only thing that they should have authority over according to the Constitution. Is that what we are experiencing? No, that is not at all the case. Let's see. We have 3 minutes left of this fantastic class. We have talked too much. I have talked too much. It's your turn next week. All right. So instead of jumping into this, I'm going to leave our question to think about over the week. I'm going to go back to chapter 5. Now, to be honest, I don't know why they had this whole lecture on immigration at the spot that they had it in. I find it to be a little bit out of place, but I think it is an interesting conversation that is extremely relevant to today. But what I want to ask you guys to think about and to come prepared to talk about in class next time is, what is the difference between an immigrant and a settler? What do those words mean? And for bonus points, if you can talk about why that would matter in today's discussion, because I can tell you our presidential candidates right now are having discussions about this stuff. Talk to me about what the relevance is. Let's share with each other about what you think the difference is and why it matters. Okay. All right. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go back to the homework answers for the review worksheets. If you don't need to have those, feel free to hop off. And if you do, let's stick with it together. Okay. Number 1, the answer is A, the qualifications that enable him to vote for rulers. Number 2 is B, Article 1, Section 8 and the 14th Amendment. 3 is D, all of the above. 4 is A, UN protocols on refugees, quotas, and amnesty programs. 5 is D, a memorandum. 6 is B, the 1970s and 1980s. 7 is C, 2015. 8 is D, it remains intact while working through the court. 9 is A, they remain entirely subject to the jurisdiction of their home countries. And 10 is A, Article 4 of the Constitution. That Roman numeral got me for a minute. All right, Chapter 6, worksheet number 1. Number 1 is federal state. 2, essays, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay. 3, federalists. 4, popular, familiar. 5, revise articles, confederation. 6, bills, rights, federal, power, military, treasury. 7, consent, governed. A, union. B, justice. C, tranquility. D, defense. E, welfare. F, liberty. Permanent, future generations, unborn children. 8, purposes, powers. 9, popularly, district, legislatures, popular. 10, great compromise, parliament. 11, hot-headed, popular. 12, constitutional, democracy. 13, representatives. 14, law, rule. 15, minority or majority. Chapter 6, worksheet 2. 1, majority, subjective, rule. 2, the workbook says establish, but I believe the answer is determine. 3, revenue, House, Senate. 4, Congress, President, veto. 5, 2/3. 6, tax, spend, debts, common, general. 7, original intent, not enumerated. 8, subsidize, spend, general. 9, borrow, commerce, naturalization, immigration, bankruptcy, value, measures, counterfeiting, post offices, patents, Supreme Court, piracy, war, armies, navy, discipline, militia, seat, government, military. 10, necessary, proper, foregoing, expand federal power. 11, necessary, forbidden. 12, limitations. 13, habeas corpus. 14, treaties, money, contracts, unreasonably. Okay, y'all doing good? All right. If there is nothing else, then I think we are good to go. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.